Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present and recognise the people of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders whose land we are on. This is the Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and being a Darwin boy and being from the Territory is the reason I'm in front of you. So not my Greek heritage necessarily, although I'm the son of immigrants. Thank you, Warren, for not going through my entire resume, but I do want to highlight one of the passion areas I have is what I'm about to speak about. And I think the Goldman panel was phenomenal, and of course Andrew did us proud with the Northern Territory. So I've got some prepared remarks and we'll definitely get into Q&A, but I'm definitely involved in ESG around the world in a variety of different areas, and I can speak to that in Q&A. To say we're in a time of great disruption is an understatement. The COVID-19 pandemic has called all of us, the new triangle, governments, business and civil society, has indeed inverted, and civil society is now setting the pace. It has arrived. If you didn't know that before, it's the simplest way to think about it, and it's the first takeaway I would like to leave you with. Whether it was the pandemic itself, whether it was the GFC of 2009, whether it was 9/11, this century has been one of great disruption, and the message coming to us from civil society is the old way is out. The new way has arrived, and we've got to open up our eyes, ears, and all of our senses to the risks that are now embedded in our new way as we construct it, as we lead the way to this century's demands. As the panel was talking about, the risks way beyond financial. There's definitely been signals to us for some decades, no bigger signal than the carbon, climate change situation that we're facing as it relates to the threat to the planet itself. I am not up here to convince you of the science, nor convince you of anything other than the reality of what's going on, and I'll show you a chart here in a minute. This is the greatest human challenge that is in front of our species. If you haven't embraced it yet, do it immediately. Decarbonisation is a word thrown around very easily. It's incredibly hard to do. And to say that we're in the middle of this massive transition is an understatement. On one slide, I am articulating to you, you can read it, I'm not going to read it to you, the nature of the transition. A reminder for those of you who are history buffs like me, the 19th century was all about wood, and we went to coal. 20th century saw the discovery of oil and gas, and we created the dynamism that gave us modernity, gave us privilege, put the word capitalism and the word democracy together, and created great wealth of nations. It created amazing economic growth, but it also created the problems of the 21st century. How do we do this? How do we decouple carbon growth with economic growth? How do we actually do it in a sustainable way? A word that is totally not used right anymore. Okay. How do we actually drive it? Well, on this slide is the answer sheet. As President Obama, who I was privileged to work with, famously said back in 2012, it's an all-of-the-above strategy, which of course creates the complexity. Of course, any one of us can go out there and be active on any one of those things. And any one of us can do any one of those things very well. But it's going to take all of us to do all of those things very well. And to get all of us to do all of those things very well means civil society, business, and government has to collaborate like never before. Now, just to put the case a little stronger, this is the issue. Okay, left alone, we are in deep trouble. If we go to current policy scenarios, not much better. Unconditional NDC scenarios, which are the commitments from Paris, and then conditional ones are there to be seen, and get us the 2 degree, 1.8 degree, 1.5 degree numbers, the gigatons of CO2 emitted have to begin their downward slide. COP26 will, I believe, do it this year. I think we're going to walk away from Glasgow with these recommitments. So if you aren't already where the Goldman panel was and where your mind should be, get there from this day on. The tipping point is here. The opportunity point is massive. The risk point is bigger. And so how does one really do what needs to be done? As eloquently put by the Goldman panel, E, S, and G need to be interwoven, integrated, and create the policy frameworks to make that happen. Now, you can see what's happening in terms of the agenda in money. Money is responding. I mean, if you go back to the Tulip Wars, if you go back to World War I and World War II, money actually ended up driving the consequence. So it's a phenomenal thing that we're seeing this consequence now playing out in the money world. But with all due respect to my money colleagues, and I advise banks, I'm on boards of banks and all that, there is more to this than the money movement. The ESG movement, as already implied, is deeply cultural and deeply generational. It is creating the emergence of the core of the word sustainability at our very heart of society, and society needs to be educated such that the answers can be provided to society's benefit. As we go from 7 billion people to 9 billion people by 2050, the data I've showed you on the previous slide tells us that we already are making a mistake by setting 2050 targets. The world is moving to 2030 targets and needs to move there yesterday. Here in Australia, we are lagging in setting the targets, and that's not good enough for a G20 country. We need to set 2030 targets that enables the transition to occur in a programmatic, sustainable way. And business has decided to step up and lead. This is the most amazing driver of them all, to see that the business community has worked out that in fact their license to operate in the era of sustainability comes from civil society. That the old drumbeat of profit, without purpose, you will lose your license to operate. Smart managers and directors know this, and they know they need to build long-term value, that you have to focus not just on profitability, but your social purpose that gives you the right to be profitable. Firms that lose sight of this will lose their license to operate very quickly. As already articulated by the panel, ESG factors are being factored into valuations. The interests of stakeholders, not just shareholders, is becoming very, very impactful. Valuation premiums will occur to those who get it right. Valuation discounts will occur to those who get it wrong. And those who are in the industries of the 20th century will be told to move in the industries of the 21st century. The Shell court decision of a week or two ago means that there is no option. If you followed Ben Van Buren, who's a personal friend, the CEO of Shell, and his response this week, what did he say? We will meet the response of the court challenge of 45% emissions reductions by 2030. We heard the Exxon example earlier. There is no question in my mind that the 20th century model will be now relegated to history as we build the business model of the 21st. So what about the Northern Territory? Darwin boy, very proudly so. Followed my entire career thinking that I'd always been Darwin, and boy did I get that wrong. I became a chemical engineer for reasons I still don't understand. But that brought me east to Brisbane and the University of Queensland, got me hired by Dow, and 43 years later I retired. I could fill a lot in between, but the most important thing for me is I never lose sight of my roots. I'm loyal to the people who got me here, and it will always be. I'm loyal to Darwin and the Northern Territory. I'm loyal to my Greek immigrant family who brought us out here and helped us in this great country of ours be successful. I'm loyal to my country of Australia. I'm loyal because it's the right thing to do. If you learn, your obligation is to teach. And that's what the opportunity mix in the Northern Territory brings me. Serving, as Michael Gunner gave me the opportunity to do, the Territory, I was a sucker for it. He made one phone call, I said yes before he finished the sentence. And here we are, this many months later, Andrew just wonderfully articulated the opportunity mix. If you look at the opportunity mix, the Northern Territory, apart from its strategic location, is incredibly well positioned to do the many things that you heard from Andrew, but also that is on this slide. As our former Chief Scientist Alan Finkel says, shipping sunshine from the Northern Territory is a no-brainer. You know, we've always been served by energy exports, certainly LNG and gas of more recent times. But to think of it this way, to actually think about, wow, can we add value to this energy in the Northern Territory? Wow, can we take this great sun and wind and appropriate base power, whether it comes from hydrogen or elsewhere with batteries, and ship electrons? Can we be bold and ship them under the sea to places like ASEAN and Singapore? Yeah, we can. We can. And remember my call to action of 5 or 10 minutes ago. We must. This is a conversation as an either or. As Jim Collins in his book Good to Great says, it's not the tyranny of the or, it's the power of the and. To manage that transition, the and word needs to come into our vocabulary, and here it is. Very simple formula. Inputs plus enablers gives outcomes. Put against that, the opportunity that now is created by the Northern Territory government, as already articulated by Andrew. I have been in the country 16 months or so. I used to say trapped or stranded. I don't say that anymore as I look out this window. It's a marvelous place to be trapped or stranded, former penal colony or not. I would tell you that the federal government and the territory and the state governments have been very responsive to this case for change brought around by the pandemic, but no more so than the Northern Territory government. I am so proud of what they've done already to absolutely make it easier to grab the opportunities on this slide. And here you're looking at the very, very first top-down planned hub for adding value to our critical minerals, to our energy resources, whether they be renewables or natural gas, to do it in a decarbonization way, to introduce carbon capture and storage, to indeed do not only green hydrogen, but actually make the electrolyzers, and I was having that conversation at our table, to bring the advanced manufacturing digital revolution to one place, and to locate it through to the largest markets in the world on your doorstep. I don't know about the term no-brainer in Australia, but it's a big no-brainer in terms of being investor ready. This will create amazing opportunities in all those areas that I've just articulated, and frankly, it's good to go. What are you waiting for? There are a few others in the country. I don't want to do this as just an NT thing. We have announced around the country so that you know my background and my 40-odd years of traveling the world and going to governments around the world. We are unabashedly borrowing from how this is done everywhere else. Hubs, special economic zones, we didn't invent them here. We just never did them. Because we had this mindset of being a farm, a hotel, and a quarry is good enough. Value adding in the era of ESG is your way to get not only sustainable value add jobs of the high paying kind for our next generation of talent, it's also to treat the planet with respect. And as we move from 7 billion to 9 billion, put the assets on the ground that have zero impact to the planet. as well as providing national security in an era of disruption to supply chains. Globalization 2.0 has arrived, and it's all about regional alliances, not about global, unabashed free trade agreements. So Middle Arm is a perfect place, and as I wrap up my comments, let me make you very well aware of very simple lists. I gave a talk yesterday at some other conference where I said, the country is brilliant, it's got great minds, but it's enamored with the 20th century concept of think tanks and reports and commissions and writing more of them and writing more of them. We need to get out of the think tank mode to the do tank mode. If you haven't heard of a do tank, it gets things done. And do tanks are full of people who understand the problem and go to the solution, and it's the who and the how, not the what and the where. We should know the what and the where by now. Heaven knows we talk about it enough, and stop this raving around on TV shows, which I've actually fallen victim to occasionally. I would tell you, this simple list is your prescription for the 21st century. So whether you're investing in the Northern Territory, and they're moving very fast in these three areas, or whether you are investing anywhere in the country, and for that matter globally, the recognition that it's no longer a blue-collar or white-collar worker that we're absolutely educating and training. It's a term that my former CEO at IBM, where I'm on the board, Ginny Rometty, used the term new-collar. A new-collar worker is digitally proficient, has the skills to embrace AI as an offense and advanced analytics and all the things that go with edge computing and smart search, and in fact, in a defense context with cyber and protecting our knowledge. That's a new-collar worker. Demand and supply needs to be recalibrated such that we actually create the jobs for the new-collar worker in the hubs like the Middle Arm precinct. We are getting labor shortages in this country, but they're in the absolute wrong areas. We don't want low-tech service jobs alone. We want the high-tech digital value-add skills. And I think the Territory firmly got that in our report. The second point, already implied, we're entering an era very quickly where Australia as a nation and the Territory as a lead player because of its location will have to embrace that if you sell to the US, you may not be able to sell to China. And if you sell to China, you may not be able to sell to the US. If you don't think that's a real thing, spend some time with the people who understand what's going on geopolitically. This is not just saber rattling. This is a reconstituting of supply chain and sovereign risk. A rules-based global order and a China literacy is an absolute essential framework for a country to embrace. I happen to think that here in Australia, we've started to understand that. And third and not least, I'll end with where I started. It's not an option. Okay. This is no longer, I'm going to talk about it and I'm going to have a board meeting about it and, we'll have another board meeting about it and then this is no longer that period of time. Every one of these verticals, environmental, social, and governance, is being remade, redone, and metrics and transparency of those metrics will mean all your stakeholders will know where you stand. And what's right in the 21st century is the thought I will leave you with. And that is, at my former company, in the 90s and before that, we used to think about the things we did in environment in particular as protecting our footprint, our assets, our factories, our buildings, etc. As the 2000s and into this century occurred, we rewrote our sustainability goals, our 10-year sustainability goals, around the term handprint. The thought of handprint was, we send products to the world. What happens to them? Are they good for humanity or are they bad for humanity? Are they good for the planet or bad for the planet? So the rules around that changed. As we turned into this last decade, we rewrote all the sustainability practices around the 3 pillars of environment, social, and governance. And of course, as already referenced, the United Nations SDG goals was a great roadmap for us around the thought that I will leave you with, which makes it essential you respond to it. It's not footprint. It's not footprint and handprint. It's blueprint. The planet needs a blueprint for this century, and the rules-based framework to create it has arrived. And I do believe G7, G20, and COP26 will see the beginning of that being written. Be part of it. It's a phenomenal time to have an opportunity, especially in the Northern Territory. And I'll stop there. Thank you.